As you look to what the majority leader has in mind for June, it's pretty clear the era of bipartisanship is over.
Welcome back. Joe is off. Not sure when the era of bipartisanship ever began, but okay. That includes for voting rights. As we reported, Senator Joe Manchin dashed hopes on Sunday of passing a sweeping election overhaul bill that would guarantee universal access to mail-in voting and secure 15 days of early voting in every state. The For the People Act has the backing of top party leaders, including President Biden. Despite his meeting yesterday with top civil rights leaders, the West Virginia Democrat remains unmoved.
What we had was we had a respectful, we had a very informative, and it was a very good conversation that we had, and as a starting of a good relationship. It really was.
Manchin says he would back a different voting rights bill, but that, too, is facing serious obstacles. Named after John Lewis, the legislation faces an uphill climb to break a filibuster in the Senate. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell made that clear again yesterday.
There's no threat to the voting rights law. It's against the law to discriminate in voting on the basis of race already, and so I think it's unnecessary.
Joining us now, President and CEO of the National Urban League, Mark Morial, who organized that meeting with Senator Manchin and civil rights leaders yesterday. Mark, it's great to see you this morning. So
Good morning, Willie.
I was going to say take us inside the room, but I think it was a Zoom call. So take us inside the Zoom call. We heard from Senator Manchin using terms like respectful and courteous. I'm not sure that moves the ball forward in the way you hoped it would. But what was the case that you made to Senator Manchin?
Thank you, Willie. We thought it very important for Senator Manchin to hear directly from us, not through media, not through intermediaries, not through staff, how important the For the People Act is and how important the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act are to confronting the tsunami, the pandemic, the onslaught of voter suppression legislation, which is sweeping across the nation. Now, let's be clear. We asked Senator Manchin to reconsider his position on the For the People Act. And certainly we did not change his mind in this meeting. But we, I think, spent a good deal of time sharing with him how outrageous, ridiculous, discriminatory, and unnecessary many of these new laws and proposed new laws are in light of the record voter turnout and the flawless election we had in 2020. We also spent a great deal of time talking about the filibuster from the standpoint of its history, Willie. The filibuster has been used for better than 100 years, but it has primarily been used to block civil rights legislation. Yes, it's been used for other things, but its primary use over the years, whether it's Richard Russell and Strom Thurmond and others, and now Mitch McConnell is, if you will, standing in that tradition, the tradition of Richard Russell and Strom Thurmond, by saying he'll use the filibuster to block the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And I think it was a low moment. I know Senator McConnell, and he has said to me on numerous occasions how proud he is of his record on civil rights. Well, he just threw that away with his announcement on yesterday. And I think the American people need to be clear. He's smart enough to know that these voter suppression laws are discriminatory. They're intentionally discriminatory. They're designed to suppress the votes of black and brown people. And he set himself up as an obstacle, as a stone wall to what the majority of the American people want. So with Senator Manchin, we agreed to meet again. It was a starting point because from a civil rights leadership perspective, from a National Urban League perspective, from my point of view, we are not going to give up. We're not going to give in, fighting to pass these bills. This is a tough climb. We know it's a hard climb, but it is something that has to be done. It's so crucial when you look. I looked this morning again at what is happening at the state level. If you look at these bills, Willie, they sound like something out of Soviet Russia or North Korea. If you just look at what they seek to do, they're absurd, They're ridiculous, they're unnecessary, and they're suppressive.
Well, let's just underline Senator McConnell yesterday didn't just come out in opposition to the For the People Act, which we knew, but he said he also believes the John Lewis voting rights bill is, quote, unnecessary. So you're not going to get to 60 votes that way. So what did you say to Joe Manchin, who has said, look, I'm for the John Lewis voting rights bill. I just can't go as far as the For the People Act. Is that a compromise you'd be willing to accept? The people on that call yesterday, they say, look, we'd prefer For the People, but we'll take your vote on John Lewis?
We need both. It's not a compromise. The two work in tandem with each other. They're different legislative instruments because of some constitutional requirements to build a particular record in the case of the John Lewis bill. But we need both. Now, here's what I think we can fairly characterize Joe Manchin's objections as being procedural and political. They did not seem to be, in large measure, to the substance of the For the People Act, although we did not get into a detailed discussion about that. This is really turning into a question of whether there are people in the Republican caucus, a number of people in the Republican caucus, who will follow in the tradition, the American tradition on voting bills, whether it's the previous Voting Rights Act, whether it's the Voter Registration Act in the 90s, or many, many other voting bills, who will follow in the tradition that they have always been bipartisan. Why now? Why now has the issue of protecting democracy and access to the ballot box become a partisan exercise because you're more interested in power than you are in American values, more interested in power and maintenance of power or reacquisition of power than you are in some of the fundamental principles upon which this nation has been formed and which many have fought to improve. John Lewis, we know his tradition. Yesterday, I think, was a low day in the career of Mitch McConnell when he said, quote unquote, it's unnecessary. He knows better than that. He's a smart enough lawyer. He's playing intellectual games with the necessity of protecting democracy. And I think there's got to be a focus on the idea that he has now become the number one obstacle, I think, to this idea of bipartisanship in the United States Senate, because he is, before you have hearings, before you have negotiations, before you have conversations, he's drawing lines in the sand.
Yeah. Well, Anna Palmer, he's shown who he is to an extent. I guess there's always hope for renewal. But I'd like to ask you about Joe Manchin and just what are the sticking points here? Or is this an impossibility? And are we really at the point in our country where we can't improve voting rights legislation? We can't pass anything?
I think it is going to be a very uphill battle. I mean, when you look at the voting rights issue, Joe Manchin is clearly the Democrat that groups and others are looking to because they need him. But he is one Democrat. You're going to need at least 10 Republicans here. And Mitch McConnell said what a lot of Republicans feel and where they are, which is they're not going to support any of this. When you look back at S1, which is a fundamental bill for Democrats that have, they have said that this is going to be their issue. Chuck Schumer has said he's going to put this on the floor before the end of the summer, which is likely going to fail. But when it even came into the committee, you had both Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell. It's an existential crisis for both parties in the sense that Democrats believe that it is necessary, and Republicans are fighting tooth and nail on every issue when it comes to this. So I don't think that this is going to be something where you're going to find even a modicum of the ability for bipartisanship. It just is. So the two parties are so fractured when it comes to this issue.
And what about police reform? Is there any hope on that front, Anna?
Yeah, we were actually reporting this morning in Punchbowl News, our morning newsletter, that actually they're starting to circulate some text here, which is the first step. I would say I am cautiously optimistic when you talk to the negotiators that they actually have found some agreement on these issues. So definitely, they're looking to try to find a pathway forward here in the next 2 to 3 weeks to find out, can they actually come to an agreement? But the fact that they're circulating text, I think, is very optimistic. And I would just say one other note of optimism is I feel like I often come on here and I'm very bearish about most deals, but something that we are watching really closely is immigration reform. And you have some Senate negotiators led by Dick Durbin meeting today on that, and that's been an issue that's really kind of been in the background. We haven't really seen a lot of kind of progress on that, but the fact that they're meeting is something that's noteworthy and something we'll be watching really closely.
Anna Palmer, thank you. Mark Morial, thank you as well. We appreciate you both coming on this morning. And